Pleas General Division. Mike, floor is yours, sir.
Good morning. Today is February 28th, 2023, and we're here to conduct a budget hearing for Common Pleas General Division. It has numerous divisions within the Common Pleas, 1, 2, 5, and 4, as well as a lot of outside funds, such as their Special Project 1, 2, and 3, just to name a few. I know I've worked with Judge O'Donnell, and when Judge Lucci was here about their regular budgets, I think they had minimal questions or concerns on that, besides Judge Lucci, when he left, about a possible additional attorney within his fund. But I know Judge wanted to talk about a few items that are up in the future within the Common Pleas Division. So I'll turn it over to the Honorable Judge O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mike. First, I'd like to start off by, as you're aware, Judge Lawson passed away on Saturday, and she had been there. If you don't recall, she got elected in '08 when Judge Weaver retired, and then implemented some pretty good programs. One of the programs that sticks out initially she started was this gardening program on her grounds, and had the juveniles that were in the detention center would plant vegetables, and then when they grew, they were harvested and they were used actually in the facility they would consume that food, and that the extra items would go to those in need outside the community. But she got elected without opposition in 14, and then again in 20. So there were some pretty innovative programs that she implemented over the years, and did a lot of it through grant funding from the state, and got a lot of recognition and awards from the state. So prior to her taking the bench, she was practiced mainly in the family law, juvenile court, domestic relations area. And for anybody who has practiced in that area, and I did a fair amount of that, it's a rugged area to practice in, because it's nothing but strife and conflict, and it's focused on, really, in the domestic relations realm, to try to make sure that the parents can resolve those differences, because it impacts kids. And her career was mostly focused on the juvenile nature, and the culmination of that was her service of some 14 years as a judge. So we're going to miss her, but all we can do is move forward. So in the interim, as you know, we're still down one in the general division with Judge Lucci leaving. So the three of us, Judge Collada and Condon and I, are kind of doing what needs to be done through signatures for judgment entries coming out of juvenile court. They have a good staff over there, a lot of very good magistrates, so I think things will be okay. There's been a request made of the Supreme Court to appoint a retired judge to sit until that spot is filled. That's well underway, and I expect that'll happen relatively soon. And as I said, we're still down one. We're expecting an appointment for that seat either this week or next week is kind of the general consensus of what's going on in Columbus, because it's been these interviews, the application process started in December, so it's about that time where that should happen. So hopefully it will happen soon. Mike mentioned that really when Judge Lucci lost Kelly Eccles, who he had as a staff attorney for some upwards of 20 years, he hired Taylor Ikabachi from the prosecutor's office to take her spot. Taylor wasn't there very long. I think she came in at a salary of $60,000, and within probably a couple months left to go to Gallagher Sharp in Cleveland. And I think what was reported to me is she was hired in at about $103,000. So then after Taylor left, Judge Lucci spent a lot of time trying to replace her, and he sent out notices to all, I think there's 8, John, law schools in Ohio, sent notices out for the opening of the position, based on a salary of $60,000, and got 0 responses for it, and just could not find anybody. So as a result, never filled it. So Judge Lucci and I had asked Mike to approach you guys about implementing at least a starting salary of around $70,000, depending, of course, on experience, and hopefully that'll get filled. And it's important to know that I'm going to give you some numbers for 2022 in my court, and they're relatively, well, they are similar because we take our cases at random and everybody ends up within a case or two at the end of the year with the same number of cases. So in my court, in 22, there were 189 new criminal cases filed. There were 240 new civil cases filed. And then there were a bunch of others, for instance, stalking, foreign judgments, judgment liens, miscellaneous cases, and state liens that are really, they don't take a lot of time, but the bulk of it is the criminal and the new civil that come in. And the criminal, while there's 189, there's more civil than criminal, obviously, in the numbers I just gave you. But the criminal takes up probably 85 to 90% of the time of the sitting judge. And so the civil kind of sits there, the complaint gets filed, the response comes in, and then the schedule moves forward toward the end of a trial. In most cases will settle before that, but those cases have a shelf life, and they have requirements that the Supreme Court gives us, the guidelines that they have to be resolved in. But the civil cases will go on and on and on, and there are a lot of motions that are filed, or summary judgment motions that have to be reviewed. And so the staff attorneys are vital to the operation of the civil justice system. If the staff attorneys weren't there, I don't know how civil cases would make their way through the system. Because, for instance, we each have our own assigned criminal days. My day is on Wednesday, and the idea of that is on Wednesday, I can schedule a full day of criminal cases, and I have theoretically, the exclusive use of the prosecutors and the public defenders in order to get those cases done. Now, inevitably, my criminal cases spill over into Judge Collada's day, Judge Conda's day, and prior Judge Lucci's day, and we have to kind of jockey to make sure that we're not, I don't want to interfere on a Thursday with Judge Conda's schedule. He's primary on it. But those criminal cases, every day, all the 5 days I deal with criminal cases. If they're not the initial case on a pretrial or a trial, they're probation violations, because as you're probably aware, on F4s and F5s, there's always a presumption that they should be placed on community control absent some certain findings, okay? And the idea of this system is not to just throw everybody in the prison, because at some point, especially on an F4 or F5, they're getting out relatively soon, and it's the way that the DRC is operating, it's sooner rather than later. So you haven't solved the problem. So there's multiple attempts to try to get to afford treatment, and they are afforded treatment in order to get them to break that cycle, to bring down the number of hearings we have to have. So it's not unusual to have 4 or 5 probation violations and try to implement or try to get somebody to encourage them to change. So as a result, beyond the new criminal cases that come in, there's the bounce back. If I put somebody on 3 years of community control, they violate, there has to be a hearing, there has to be actually 2 hearings that take place, 2 separate hearings. So it really bogs down the schedule. And the point I'm trying to make is that that doesn't leave a lot of time for the civil docket from the standpoint of the judge. So the staff attorneys, when a complaint comes in, they'll review the complaint, they'll wait for a responsive pleading, and then that's when my involvement begins. I get on the phone, I have a scheduling conference, and we talk about what the issues are, and we get a detailed schedule all the way through a trial. Right? Now, inevitably, in civil cases, the civil lawyers don't always get along real well, but there are disputes about discovery and whether somebody has to produce something or not produce something, show up for a deposition or not show up. And so those disputes need to get resolved, and that's where I step in that early process to try to do that. There are motions that are filed that need rulings, and specifically a lot of cases are summary judgment motions that are filed, and those can be quite complicated. So the primary responsibility for reviewing the things that come in and the writings of opinion are done by the staff attorneys. Now, we consult. If somebody files a motion for summary judgment, there's a response. Then I talk with the civil attorney, we work through the issues, and then I make the determination of how the ruling is going to be, and the staff attorney writes it up, and I look at it, we go over it, and ultimately when I agree that that's what we're going to do, it gets signed. But if they're not there, there's no time to do that. There's simply no time to do that. So it's important for whoever comes in this new position in the next week or two that the first thing they have to do is find a staff attorney, hire a staff attorney, and I discussed the crunch that we've been facing in that entire process. So that's one of the things that's at the forefront, and I'm lucky. I've got one staff attorney that was with Judge Mitrovich. She came there in 1999, and she's still there and does a fantastic job. And I got lucky when one of my staff attorneys left in, I think it was in mid-16, I found another staff attorney, Nicole Wilson, who is fantastic at what she does, is one of the smartest lawyers that I've met, and just does an outstanding job. So there's a little bit of luck involved there too. But and really the history in this county with staff attorneys has been, they've been pretty consistent, and they generally will stay longer than, for instance, in Cuyahoga, where they hire, and there's a big turnover that takes place there. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of the staff attorneys and how the courts operate. One of the big things that we've talked about over the last several years, by several I mean 2 to 3 years, and it was probably more along the lines of 3 years, was at some point this case management system that we have, which is CourtView, is going to have to be replaced. Judge Lucci got that process going 15 years ago when CourtView came in, maybe 15, 16 years ago, as simply a case management system. And it worked well for that purpose, but it's like I kind of equate it to when the Windows operating system came in. It was Windows, and then Windows 2, and then we got to that disaster that was Vista, and then beyond Vista, the operating systems change, and this technology is changing. So we've had this system for 15 years. Along the way, there's been the implementation of an on-base imaging system, and it was a different vendor than CourtView, so that was added. So now, if an entry is filed, for instance, I did a sentencing last week. If you go to the docket, you can click on the image and you can see the document that was filed and the judgment that was filed. So that's what the on-base system does. It allows the public or anybody to go on and see exactly what an entry says. And then it took a long time, but eventually we got the e-services aspect of it running. So now electronic filing is nearly fully implemented. In the general division, it's been fully implemented. So, that does, it really, we wish it would have been implemented earlier, but it wasn't. We've got people in place that have done an outstanding job of getting that thing going, and it allows people to file complaints, a lawyer to file a complaint when he's sitting at his desk, his or her desk, and then it avoids, actually, to a certain extent, it helps the security of the courthouse, because you don't have people that come in that have to bring the paper and file it, and so you have less people, you have less traffic that way. But everything is done now fully electronically, and domestic relations is getting there. That's a little more of a hassle because they have so many forms, and so that's been a more lengthy transition. So that is part of the services of CourtView. The company that has CourtView is Equivant, so they've got e-services also. And then there's another aspect that we're just implementing now that's called AI Smart Bench, which allows essentially the biggest value of that is going to be it allows the judge and the staff attorneys to go back and forth on versions of an entry and then electronically file it. But this system is reaching its useful life. And when we talked about this, and this goes back to when Maureen Kelly was the clerk, we talked to her about it, and then Faith Andrews, we're talking about to replace the system, to get it a more efficient system, and to not take pieces and parts from different companies to implement. And we're talking in the neighborhood of $2 to $2.5 million when that is replaced. Now, probate court is going through that process now. They've just begun that with a court view product called JWorks, and our intent at this point is to sit back, watch how that is implemented, watch how it works, figure out if there are any bugs that need to be worked out, or we're also going to be looking at different manufacturers. For instance, Tyler does a similar system that handles our jury right now. So there's a lot of different things to look at, but that's kind of the neighborhood of what we're talking about in order to implement this system, and it's going to make for a much simpler, much more efficient way to operate this system, because there's obviously there's no going back to paper. There are some counties out there that are still using paper, but this is the kind of the next generation and the improvement, and it's gonna streamline a lot of things and make things easier and make things more accessible to the public. So that really is the big thing that's on the horizon with the courts. And again, I'm just speaking at this point for the general division, and that obviously affects domestic relations because they utilize the same record keeping system that we have. So, but that's really the big things going on now. We know there's improvements that you folks have approved for the HVA system, which will be really welcome, because that system over there, and this goes back since I've been around since the late 80s, 87, 88. When you get to May and that temperature fluctuates, it could be 85 degrees in a courtroom, or it could be 65 degrees in a courtroom, and there's just no way to control it. So it's a frustrating thing, but we're confident, and talking to Jason, he's confident that this will be worked out. We'll be in good shape that way. So that's kind of where I'm at and what I came for. But any questions that you guys have?
Judge O'Donnell,
Yeah.
on the software system, is there a continued maintenance yearly after that?
There is, and that's, I think with Court View, we're dealing in the neighborhood of $90,000 to $100,000, but that's every system, the licensing, the maintenance, and all those things.
That seems to be the popular thing now, instead of buying it and having it done. I know the police departments deal with the same thing.
Yeah, so that's inevitable. That's industry wide, so that's not going to change. So and then one of the things to look at is, and I know the Tyler system may be more expensive from an annual maintenance agreement than the Equivant system, but these are all things we're going to look at in the next year or so to see where that's at and what the best fit would be.
Mr. Mayor, is this something we would plan ahead and put money in a separate account, or?
With regard to that, it would be a general fund expenditure, and that's why we have a permanent improvement fund for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Sir.
in addition to saying thank you to Judge O'Donnell and his colleagues for always working so well with our budget director, I would just echo Judge O'Donnell's sentiment with respect to Judge Karen Lawson. It's a great loss to Lake County. My understanding is she was the first woman ever to hold the position of juvenile court judge. She was a graduate of our law school at Cleveland State, very involved in the Inns of Court and in alumni programs. There's just been countless people who've been expressing the loss, and all of Lake County is very sorry for the loss that you and your colleagues have suffered, because I know what a great contribution she made to your work.
Thank you. And really, it's been, that court was separately created, I think, in the 80s, and Judge Hoos was the first He was in Willoughby Muni, and then he became the juvenile judge. And then Judge Weaver from, I'm trying to remember, 1992, I think he came in, and he was there till '08, till the constitutional restriction came up, and then Judge Lawson. So you've had only 3 in that position for for upwards of 40 years. So, which that consistency lends itself to a good operation of the court. And one of the lawyers I spoke to Saturday evening was that I haven't talked to in a little while, does a lot of work in domestic and juvenile, just said what a smooth operation that court was. And and that speaks to the staff that she hired, because there are one magistrate, Jan Bell, has been there since Judge Lawson came in. So there's a lot of steady hands there that help that process. And when you got somebody that comes in that operates the court and has that consistency, and a lot of good people in that court, it really lends itself to a smooth operation. So,
Judge, I will say over the last, I believe it's coming up on 7 years, your colleagues have been a pleasure to work with, especially in the last couple of years. The candid conversations we've had about budgets, forecasting, planning. One of the things that really was impressed upon me, and I just put some thoughts here, the cost of justice. Some of the suggestions of pay-as-you-go, fee-based. But then it was pointed out, okay, so what's the balance of the cost of doing business and justice? And the clear impression that I came away with, and I believe also, justice should not be just for those who can afford it. Your colleagues have used special funds, but those funds are being depleted. I also give high praise to you and your colleagues for seeking grant opportunities actively. That has been a real benefit. Courts are never going to be self-sustaining. They're always going to be a financial commitment on a community. In Lake County, we have a number of people who say, well, we have our Menor Court, we have our Willoughby Court, we have our Painesville Court. What is this? No, your courts serve all the people of Lake County. That's a distinction. And I think this may have to do with the fact that civics has been taken out of schools. People do not understand the role that your courts play. And I think this is an opportunity under the budgeting process to say, you can't just raise your fees. You can't just worm every nickel out of every case that comes before you because somebody is going to be denied justice because they cannot afford it. There's been a lot of talk about sentencing, and you touched on it. The sentencing practices that are already in place that are keeping people out of jail. I know progressive is sometimes a dirty word. Well, I like to say let's take back the English language. Our courts have been at the forefront of doing the right thing, giving people every opportunity to succeed, finding ways to intervene, cut recidivism. But as you very ably pointed out, when somebody violates the terms, there are automatic actions that take place. Those actions cost money. And that sets a series of events in place that's not your discretion. As a judge, you are obligated to do these things. You're talking about the technologies. I would contend that the technologies you're working with is little more than a patchwork quilt. I'm hesitant to say this, but I'll just get it off my chest. In 2020, I remember getting a call from the cybersecurity team down at the Secretary of State's office. Then it came to me through Commissioner Young. And I was rather dismissive of it because I'm thinking the least technical commissioner is the one that they reach out to. The whole thing sounded like a scam when they're talking about, well, you need to reformat your servers. Well, needless to say, I quickly got with our Board of Elections, Ross McDonald. He did recognize the names of the people involved. I had our sheriff involved. I had our IT department, Nick, and your court IT, and the vulnerability that they were concerned about. We just turned that feature off, and I don't think I'm betraying any state secrets here. It was simply just remote access. And the fear was, well, could our courts network be compromised and do damage too? Needless to say, that did not occur. But those are some of the things that were happening real time. And those are challenges. That was an aftermarket third-party application, so vendors could come in and work on their product without having to send somebody in. But that also has vulnerabilities and risks, and it's indicative of what I will call a patchwork quilt. You guys have been doing the best you can with what you have, but there are efficiencies and there are risks associated with that. But that's what really brings me to the key here. Employees, retention, recruitment. I've said it before, I'll say it again. There are needs for market adjustments. You very, again, ably stated the challenges. But when you have, even if we make an adjustment in one area, and I'll just give this example, you have magistrates versus staff attorneys versus prosecutors versus defense attorneys. As we make adjustments and market adjustments at the prosecutor level, that's by statute going to trigger the defense attorneys, which then is immediately going to, by a matter of practicality, trigger staff attorneys, which again, by a matter of practicality, is going to be having adjustments for our magistrates. I don't want to call it dominoes. I'm just saying this is just business. And you're probably the most plain-spoken of the judges we have, and I appreciate that. You say what the bear does in the woods, and I say that with all due respect, because frankly, I rather find that refreshing when somebody just says what's on their mind. There are going to be a series of events that are beyond your control, are going to be beyond our control. If we want to retrain and recruit quality people, that we're not going to be scraping the proverbial bottom of the barrel, taking what's left. We've said it before in this chamber at meetings, our justice system is in danger. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but if you lose any more staff, I don't think you have anybody in the pipeline. I think you pointed out there were 8 colleges that are normal feeders.
And I'm not sure where these graduates are going. I don't know that the numbers of law school graduates are down, but it used to be that there would be several applications for these type of jobs, because for somebody coming out of school, it's a great learning experience to see firsthand and how it works. And I just don't know. That was, Judge Lucci was extremely puzzled by the inability to get anybody to even respond. And the feedback he got was, well, I can go somewhere else and I can get more money than that, but it's just the reality of things.
So in your budget request, I'm kind of looking to Mr. Matus. I believe we have more of a status quo, but we've also added in, I believe, $400,000 for some adjustments.
Yes, Judge Lucci and Judge O'Donnell, I've been working with them to, their special project fund has been decreasing on a yearly basis, and they actually asked to move their 2 IT staff and then their foreclosure people to the general fund, which the commissioners previously signed off on and reviewed. And I have made the necessary changes within the budget for that. That equates to approximately $400,000 increase in the general fund. And that will be compounded annually by the increase in insurance costs as well as payroll adjustments that occur throughout.
That was in the heyday of the unfortunate foreclosure debacle. There were a lot of cases, and a lot of cases generate a lot of filing fees, which generate a lot of special project fees. But when that subsided, that's when that special project fee that pays those the magistrate staff really took a beating. And the magistrates, beyond the foreclosure cases that they handle these civil stalking orders, which, if you ever watch the cameras on the second floor in the lobby of the clerk's office, you'll see people down there filling out paperwork, then you'll see somebody taking them up to the second floor to have a hearing in front of the magistrate. And I happened to see one day last week that Matt Spangler, who's the magistrate that handles those stalkings, the courtroom was packed. So there's a lot of emotion there that he has to deal with too, because there were competing folks on each side. And we do have the bailiff on the second floor now, Brian Jackson, keeping an eye on that in case anything happens. So that there's beyond the foreclosure, there's the civil stalkings have not decreased. They just they keep on going. That's a constant up there with the magistrate. And we did not replace the second magistrate that left. We replaced him with an administrative assistant who had a lot of experience with the sheriff's department in foreclosures, so she can take a lot of that administrative load off of Matt Spangler with regard to foreclosure cases. The one thing when we're talking about technology, something new that we're going to make an application to the Supreme Court shortly is this Thomson Reuters product that talks about that implements digital evidence. So, for instance, I got a medical malpractice case coming up in a couple weeks, and as you might guess, hospital records, there's going to be a lot of paper in there that people can go through, but this will digitize all evidence, and it will give the ability, it'll make it much easier for the lawyers to deal with the evidence. Right now, for instance, in a prosecution case, if there's dash cam video, they have to have their computer set up, and they got to put the flash drive in. They got to hope that translates to the 90-inch screen so that the jury can see and hear what's going on. This will digitize everything. They'll just get out a file, click on the file, and it'll play. And when it comes time for jury deliberations, everything that's marked as evidence goes back to the jury, and they'll be able to view all exhibits on a large screen TV in the jury room. So, and it's not that expensive for this thing, but the Supreme Court's got a lot of grants out there that we're going to try to take advantage of. So that's another thing on the forefront of technology. One thing that I wanted to mention that as you were talking, Commissioner Hamercheck, reminded me and I was like you, okay. I was deathly afraid of technology, and when the e-filing started, I figured, all right, I gotta figure out what the hell is going on here, and I've actually adjusted pretty well to it. So now there are no more in the general division. I don't have any more paper files, no criminal, no civil. Everything is gleaned from the e-services file, and the docket sheet that I used to write on when I would do a sentencing, I would write what I did on the sentence, and then God forbid that if I tried to look back on it, I couldn't figure out what I wrote because I got such poor handwriting. Now I do that all electronically. If a trial's going on, I used to take handwritten notes on a legal pad, which if I had to go back to it and look at what somebody said an hour earlier, I could never figure it out because I couldn't read it. Now I type everything, so it's just much easier, and I've adjusted pretty well to this thing so far. But one of the things that I started doing, this is about a year ago, is put a system in where when I come into the courtroom, the bailiff hits a button and everything is live. So you can go to the Common Pleas website, you can click onto my webpage, and then you can click on to view everything that's going on. So when I'm in there, everything is live, and Judge Lucci had the same thing going. I'm not sure that Judge Collada and Condon have gotten to that point where they have done it or want to do it, quite frankly. But one of the reasons I did that is because when I sit there on the bench and I'm looking at a criminal defendant, if there's one person in that courtroom, that's a lot of people. Nobody shows up to this stuff. Nobody knows what's going on. And so this gives people the opportunity, if they want, to see what's going on, to see how it works, to see what goes into it. One of the things, I'm on the opiate task force that Kim Frazier runs. and we meet about every 3 months. And the last time we met, and this goes to what people know about the criminal justice system. One of the things I said was, we get together every 3 months and we talk about how many people died from drug overdoses, how many responses there were, what teams are in place to assist people, and all that stuff. Okay, and there's about 20 people on this task force. So about 55 minutes into the hour meeting, I said, well, this is all well and good, okay, but we've got to figure out a way to change it. Unless you change it, we're going to get together every 3 months and talk about what the numbers are, and then 3 months after that, what the numbers are. And my suggestion was that unless you get kids, meaning like 5th, 6th graders, to see what's going on, to get them in the courtroom to sit in the back and watch when somebody has destroyed their life, when their parents are sitting back there crying, it's not going to change. Okay, you can send all the DARE officers in you want, like they've been doing for 30 years, and they'll sit there and they'll talk at these kids, and these kids will all sit there, maybe paying attention, probably not. Okay, but it hasn't moved the ball on this stuff. It's only getting worse. So my frustration is, and has been, that unless you can get a program where you regularly get students in to watch what's going on, it's going to have no impact. And one of the members suggested, well, we can video these things and do it that way in the schools, because I know darn well that you're not going to get the superintendents to buy into this, because they have to teach Adam in order to satisfy the cubicles in Columbus that everybody's doing what they decide should be done. I said, you can put them on video, but there's zero impact. It's going to be another person talking at them rather than a live experience. So I don't know that that's going to go anywhere. I've had individuals on that task force that said that they would attempt to get a hold of people they know in education, but unfortunately I don't expect that aspect to change. But if anybody wants to watch what goes on in a court hearing, you can tune in, and there it is.
Oh, excellent on that. I can tell you that is something that does get underutilized, so maybe push that information out there. It would definitely be in everybody's best interest. The public, again, they have an interest, they have a hunger. I just don't know if they know where to shop, so perhaps maybe we could do a little better job of helping promote that through our commissioner's website and other social media. I know I have a colleague who's an expert at social media, so we can get some ideas going there. This is the part where I usually say no decisions will be made until all budget meetings are completed. But what I think the big takeaway, though, from your presentation is this is not the final ask. You've given us the base of where you are right now, snapshot in time. There will be market adjustments. I think that's undeniable if we're going to retain and recruit people. And that's going to be coming this year, challenges and demands on the general fund. I also wanted to thank you, though. You pointed out something that you brought back to my memory, court security. In recent times, we have actually opened up both the front and the back accesses to the courts and the second floor. It's about access, but it's also about safety. When you're in the courts, you have to feel safe.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, there was a judge was shot in Steubenville outside the courthouse, and that kind of prompted the secured area for parking, because I remember after that, and he was right outside the courthouse, and somebody was mad about a case that really wasn't one that he was handling, just shot him. Now fortunately he was armed, and the probation officer was armed, and they shot him and disabled him. But that's what prompted this security parking area, because when I would look out my window, people would just wander in and out through the parking area. One guy went, what was that game that people were playing on their phone?
Oh, Pokemon
Yeah,
Go.
there was one guy I saw out by my car, with his phone. I don't know what he was doing, but so that was, we appreciate that being done, as well as the the netting that was put up to prevent, getting shot between the rails and on the windows also. But it was really, when you look back on it, just an unsecure courthouse way back in the day. The side door that we enter into now, back when I was working for the prosecutor in the late 80s, early 90s, I walked in that door all the time and just walked up to my office. So there was no security back then. So it's a pretty secure place in the court services aspect, which Lieutenant Bowen's in charge of. Have done a really good job of not only manning those stations, but keeping an eye on what's going on in the courthouse. And regularly on that third floor, which is all domestic relation hearing room, that's like a tinderbox up there. So they make passes up there to make sure everybody's behaving themselves. So it's a very secure place as it stands right now. So.
And that's no accident. That's being
Right.
open-minded. That's not head in the sand. It wasn't so very long ago we had a defendant that just before the jury came back, murder case, committed suicide.
Right.
That person, I will say it this way, fortunately turned the gun on themselves, but at that area, the judges, prosecutors, attorneys,
The
courts,
public that was
And-
viewing that case.
but I have to say the jurors,
Yeah.
the safety of our jurors. Those are the kinds of things that we can't say, oh, those don't happen here. Yeah, they do. And if there's a vulnerability, the bad guys are going to find it. So there's that continuing improvement. I believe also the Supreme Court, they also assist with evaluations.
Right.
Obviously, we don't want to get into the specifics of that, but they're thorough.
Yeah, and they came in about 3-4 years ago, and we did a tour. So, but we appreciate that the appropriation that got us the latest round of security. So,
And you mentioned the civil protection orders and our magistrates. They're strained.
yeah. And the other, separate and apart from the civil protection orders that our magistrate hears, are the domestic violence orders that domestic relations court has to hear. So none of that seems to be on a downward trend. But
What we have heard loud and clear from our prosecutor is the frequency and severity of criminal activity is increasing. These cases, such as what you just described, are becoming more heated, even here in nice, sleepy Lake County. That has to be acknowledged. That has to be addressed. The consequences would be dire if we were to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to this. So,
all right, anything else from anybody? Any questions?
Mr. Matus?
Judge, I just want to thank you again for continuing to work with you on the budgets. I know I've worked with you and Judge Lucci. Prior to you, it was more Judge Lucci with all his funds, but again, I want to thank you as well, Judge.
It's been a pleasure working with you, Mike. Even you, Jason. No, it's good to be able to, to pick up the phone and talk to Mike or Jason or any of you guys when something comes up and is needed. So appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.